Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the Atwood Adventures Tag. This tag was created by Jolene from Bookworm Adventure Girl, and I was tagged by Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading and Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. And I'm not prepared for this, but I've taken forever to do this. I was tagged months ago, so we're gonna get caught up. I did, however, go to the trouble of borrowing this Margaret Atwood novel from my mother because I don't own any of them because I despise Margaret Atwood. If you're new here, I was a big fan of the Lunch with Jan Wong column that the Globe and Mail had back in the mid to late 90s. And Margaret Atwood was the subject of the original Lunch with Jan Wong, in which she was the kind of person who was rude to waiters. Is that a nonsense reason to dislike a writer? Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I've disliked her ever since. Not that I'm boycotting her. I just take her books out of the library or borrow them from my mother or whatnot. And every interview I've seen with her since then, she just rings as slightly entitled and unpleasant. Question number 1. Before publishing her first collection of poetry in the early 60s, Margaret Atwood had several other jobs, including working at summer camps. What was your first job? My first real job was doing the filing at a doctor's office. It was an after-school kind of job, which was brilliant because it was basically you go do some filing a couple hours after school, which is fantastic in terms of scheduling stuff, because I know a lot of people have part-time jobs where you have to do full shifts on the weekend or evening shifts, and that was not. That was a nice, easy way to get into working. Question number 2 is, while growing up, Margaret Atwood's family spent several months each year living in the bush. What is a survival skill that you have that would help you survive living off the grid? Good question. None. No, I mean, when I was at university, I guess, for a few years, I used to go camping, like interior camping with some friends in the summer. And every year we would do at least one thing, often more than one thing. Terribly wrong. We made a lot of mistakes. I think one year we forgot to bring a pot to boil anything. Another year we went in the middle of black fly season and we didn't have any bug repellent or bug nets or anything. Another year we didn't put the food high enough and a moose ate our food the first night. So yeah, I think those experiences would be useful if I had to live in the bush, because hopefully I would not make those same mistakes again. But I might. Question 3. Margaret Atwood grew up reading comic books. Do you have a favorite comic book or comic book character? Now this weighs a ton. Preacher is probably my favorite comic. This is so heavy. Is probably my favorite comic series of all time, which is why I own these editions, which weigh a ton. Which, you know, this is Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon's kind of fantasy, western, religious commentary, shock value series, which was made into a TV series recently, which makes significant changes to the original, because the original was very tied to the particular moment in which it was ongoing in the 90s. Ennis has said that if he was writing it now, it would be more like the TV series. So it wasn't changed in ways that should freak out fans. It was changed to make it tied to the current day in the same way that the original series was tied to the 90s, because it was very that moment in time. Like when this was ongoing, I think it was just fantastic. Like I had a friend, and on New Comics Day, we would go to the comic book shop, buy this, and then read it and discuss it over chili at Tim Hortons. Because it was definitely a series you could talk about, and as well as if you wanted to just read it for the shock value stuff, you could do that too. So it worked on different levels. Why is this so heavy? Margaret Atwood is not only a poet and author, she's also illustrated books and shown her creativity in so many other ways. What are some ways that you are creative? Oh, Jolene likes Margaret Atwood so much more than I do. In what ways am I creative? Well, apparently the way I'm creative is I had an assignment. My dog has been doing different obedience classes. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen whenever she graduates a level, I post one of those pictures. But for the tricks class we were doing a couple of months ago, our final class assignment was you come up with a story and then the dog has to do different tricks that tie into when you use the word in the story. So I took that to mean write an interesting story. So I had my dog was hunting vampires in the woods, and everybody else in the class had a story about my dog came home, so I asked him to sit, that kind of thing. we're doing a different class now, and the instructor was telling people who had done that tricks class in between when I did it and when we started this other class, was like, that's the dog who did the vampire hunting. So apparently that was creative enough that other classes are hearing stories about it. So I don't know why more people aren't imagining their dogs as vampire hunters. Like, anyway. Margaret Atwood's most well-known novel is The Handmaid's Tale. What task or chore do you wish you had a maid or servant for? Someone who would vacuum dog fur every day. That would be... Yeah, somebody who would follow you around with a vacuum would be fun. Although kind of annoying because that would be loud. But you know what I mean. That would be a good robot. And not just a Roomba, but a Roomba that would be self-emptying. Then you could be completely lazy. Question number 7. The themes Margaret Atwood writes about have stayed consistent in all her writing for over 6 decades. She writes about the role of men and women in society, relationships, religion, marriage, and identity, to name a few. If Atwood were to write a novel about you, what are some themes she would include? No. I do not want her writing about me. I don't hate her writing, and I think she writes very well in her particular box of stuff. But the actual world exists around that box. It includes the box, but there's more to it, and I would not trust her to know the more to it. I think she writes very well in the box, even though I don't like her in interviews and whatnot. But I don't think she writes outside of that box, and I think when she talks about all of this stuff that Jolene mentions, she's doing it within a really narrow way. And so, no, I don't want her writing about me. Sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this tag. I feel like this is bringing out the worst in me. Question number 8 is, Margaret Atwood has created words for her novels. She has talked about how this makes it difficult for translators of her work. Do you have a favorite word, and why is it your favorite? My favorite word in the English language is dodecahedron, just because it's fun to say, and because I have fond memories of Square One, which was an educational math show from the 80s, in which there was a man on the street skit in which dodecahedron was repeated frequently. It is a 12-sided three-dimensional object. Okay, number 10. Margaret Atwood is an advocate for caring for the earth. What is something you do to help take care of the planet? I shame people for not putting their masks in the bin. If you follow me on Instagram, I have a whole thing that's called Random Mask of the Day. And if I am also throwing out dog poo, I will pick up the masks and throw them out. But mostly I just shame people, which is not that productive, but I feel better about myself. Question number 11. Margaret Atwood is passionate about animal rights, and some of her writing has included animals and reflections on animals. What is a topic that you are passionate about? I'm passionate about animal welfare, but I think animal rights as a movement, or too many people who are involved in it as a movement, ignore the gaps in human rights, 1, and 2, ignore the broader environmental impact around animal issues. Like, it's not just a question of this affects the chickens. You have to think about the whole environment. What is this doing to the actual earth in terms of the dirt, the soil, the plants, the rocks, the erosion of, all of that. Anyway, that's not what the question was. What are you passionate about? Apparently I'm passionate about complaining about how animal rights is too narrow. But wildlife welfare I am passionate about, so I'm going to say that. Question number 12 says, Margaret Atwood is supportive of new authors in a variety of ways. Who is a newer author, and or what debut novel do you wish more people knew about? Okay, here's something that I read recently that I think is successful in a way that, I don't know, not all books for this audience do. This is The Wrong Side of the Court by H.N. Kahn, which is a basketball story that is set in Regent Park here in Toronto. And it's a young adult novel, and the kids swear. And I appreciate that because kids do swear, and it's always weird to me when books are written for that audience and they have this artificially innocent language. So I'm going to say that's the author's debut. I appreciate that he was willing to use stronger language. And I think this is kind of a problem because I've seen reviews where school librarians are saying they couldn't have this in their school library. And I think that is a shame because, Question number 13 is tag some of your favorite booktubers. This tag is now 6 months old, so I don't know who's done it, But if you like Margaret Atwood more than I do, which is everybody, I think, and you haven't done this tag, please consider yourself tagged. All right, that's it for now. Ciao.